check this out. Before you start it, we need to erase away the preferences for InDesign. There's some things that are covered in the book that it's going to assume it's the first time you've opened InDesign that you're going to change later. If students already worked at your computer, they've already made the changes, especially if there's another class that's using InDesign extensively. So to reset your preferences, to erase the preferences for InDesign, find the Shift, Control, and Option keys at the bottom right-hand or left-hand corner of your keyboard. They're all clustered together. Watch on the screen. I'm going to hold down all 4 of those keys, click on the InDesign icon. When I choose Open, I'm still holding it down. It's going to give me this alert and says, hey, are you sure you want to delete them? We'll say yes. Now I can let go of the keys, and when it opens up, it's going to be completely fresh and get rid of all of my, my pre-done preferences from here. It will take just a little bit for it to open up. While this is loading, one thing I like about InDesign, if for whatever reason your program crashes or it locks up or you have to force quit or shut down your computer, InDesign will save a backup copy of whatever you have. Usually after a couple of minutes it automatically saves for you. So it's going to happen in here. It happens to everybody. If your computer ever just freezes and we have to force quit out of it, usually you don't miss anything. You haven't lost any of the work that you've done. When you open it back up, it'll get that recovery file and you can keep working from here. All right, let me give you an overview of working with InDesign. First off, when you first open it up, it'll have everything in its application frame. I'm going to turn off my application frame. Notice that some of the drop-down menus look exactly the same. We'll go here, turn this off. This will give me, there we go, kind of the way it's normally set up. On the left-hand side, you've got your toolbar and all the tools that go with it. Some of these tools work and look exactly the same. Like you've got 2 different selection tools. We've got your pen drawing tool. We've got type tools. You're able to pick colors down at the bottom of it. Remember, whenever you choose a tool, pay attention to your control panel at the very top. These will give you different options based on the tool that you have. This is specifically important when we start working with type. Your type tool and your selection tool give you 2 different options. So to change your fonts and things, you need to have your type selected. And of course, you got your palettes over here to the right. Some palettes are used more often, and if you don't see a palette that you need, you can always go to the drop-down menu, and here they are listed from here as well, and that'll open up those palettes. Here's the first thing when setting up a document. We'll go to File, down to New. InDesign can handle a variety of different things. Single-page documents, multiple documents combined together into a book. So if I was doing a chapter book, I can actually lay out each chapter individually. Or libraries of common elements. We're not going to get into books and libraries. We're going to keep it simple with normal documents. This is what the new page document opens up and looks like as. InDesign, since a lot of people do publishing both in printing, print press, and also digital publishing, you can set how your document is set up, either for a web or mobile device, a digital device, or to be printed itself. So if you want to make something that you can read on your Kindle, or you can send to a web page, or to be viewed digitally, InDesign can actually handle some of those things. The other thing it talks with or deals with is your page sizes. A letter size piece of paper, regular size, what's the height and width dimensions for a letter size piece of paper? 8.5 by 11. Right here my width is this really weird 51p0, 66p0. Traditional printers do a unit of measure called Pikas. And really the only time I've ever run into it is when working with a printer. A pica is simply 1/6 of an inch. So think about this, 1/6 of an inch. What is 66 divided by 6? 11. So this is actually 66 pikas is 11 inches. If I was to type in 11IN and then click away, it's going to automatically convert it to pikas. Later on I'll show you how to set it back to inches. But just know, the unit of measure that it's set right now is set to this. What I like is I can turn on preview, and I can get a preview of what my document will look like from here as well. Of course, the document, this is what's going to be printed. Outside, you got a little artboard. It works like Illustrator, so you can actually put things outside of the area. It just won't print. Anything you want printed needs to be on here. The little pink line is your inside margins. The line won't print. It's just there to give you as a guide when you set up your margins. So if I wanted the top margin to be 1 IN, I can unlink them. Let's give it something. Now I got 1 inch on all sides. Maybe the bottom one will be 2 inches, 2 IN. If you accidentally type in something like 0.5 and click away, it converted that to 0.5 Pikas, a 1/12 of an inch instead of 0.5 IN. Or you can actually type in 0.5, a little quotation mark, dummy mark, it also means inches as well. And that'll convert that from there. That's the first thing to keep in mind. Your book is actually going to be very specific about typing in inches rather than Pikas. And you can also set up the bleed. Remind me, what does the bleed allow you to do?
I like to print outside of the printable edge.
Okay, why is that important? You're exactly right. Little red mark. Why do I want to be able to print outside of my printable edge? Ooh, do I need to teach that unit again? Bingo. No printer in the world is able to print all the way to the edge. There's always that little border. So you add a bleed edge so you can print it on a larger piece of paper and then trim off that excess bit. That's why it's called the bleed edge, because when you cut it, it bleeds. All right, so you can even set up bleeds and make your document inside of here. I'm gonna say okay. Here's the area that we're working in. The first thing to get used to when working with InDesign is that it doesn't function like Microsoft Word. In Word, you open up a new document and you can start typing from the top all the way down. Have I lost it? No, I haven't. You can start typing at the top down. In InDesign, everything needs to be inside of its own frame. So if you want text, it needs a text frame. If you want a picture, it needs to have a picture frame. Right now, I've got my type tool selected. So if I wanted to add some type to my area, I'm going to click and drag. It'll make out a little frame box, and I've got my blinking cursor at the top. So whatever I type inside of it, will stay inside of this frame. I can actually highlight it now. Up at the top, these are all my type options. Some of them use more often, so I can like change the size of it. Check out what's happening when I make it larger, or even change the font that I'm working with. Everything stays inside of that frame. As a graphic designer, this is good because I can place my text wherever I want it to go. Now, if it's off the edge, obviously that's not going to print, but I can place it and turn it exactly where I want it to be. If I change the size of my frame, if I do something like this, it doesn't change the size of my text. It just simply rewraps it and keeps everything inside of that particular area. So for people who first learn it, that's kind of one thing to get used to. Check out what happens if my frame is too small. It'll clip off everything else and get a little red X, a little red plus sign saying I've got what's called overflow text. I need to have more room or to change the size of my text to make everything fit. If I ever want to preview what this will look like as a printed document, in other words, I don't want to see all my little margins and bounding boxes, check out the bottom of your toolbox. This icon here, when I click on it, will go into preview mode, and I can see exactly what it looks like. It gets rid of all of my extra things that I don't quite need to work with. You can also hit the W key on your keyboard and swap back and forth between those two. So that's working with text. That's the basics of working in that. The other thing you can do is to add pictures to what you want to work with. Let's grab up some pictures. For this particular project, they're going to give you a variety of thumbnails, and you're going to place them inside of your document. As with the text, you need to have your own frame. There are specific frames for adding pictures to, and these are just called your frame tools. You can do rectangles or ellipses. With this one, you click and drag. It's got an X going through it, meaning there's no content to it. By the way, you can change the color of these as well. I've got it selected. Here's some predefined color swatches at the top. Or I can always click on my swatch over here and choose a specific color that I want to be inside of that. There's still an X, meaning there's no picture inside of it. Let's place one into it. We can go to File and Place. There it is. And I got my folder on the desktop. And we'll place an image into here. Let's just do this one. I'm going to say Open. It puts it inside of my frame. Now this picture is really, really small. So notice that even though I can move it around, I've still got a small picture inside of a big frame. If I wanted to, I can make my frame smaller and crop it off to match that size. Another thing I could do, I'm going to undo what I did, is I can make my picture a lot larger. To select the content inside of a frame, in this case the picture is my content, you get a little circle, and when you click on it, now I've got a bounding box inside of my frame. I can move my picture around inside my frame, place it wherever I want. I can even adjust the size of it to fill up my frame that I have. That's another thing to kind of get used to, is being sure that you select, right now I've got my picture, my content selected, or if I click off and I don't click on the circle, if I click on the frame itself, I move and select my frame that I need to be inside of it. Does that make sense? So knowing what you have selected is the second thing to play around with. Here's what happens if you try to do multiple pictures. Let's say I didn't have a frame created. Let's go to File and place something in it. File and Place. In this case, I'll choose, let's do number 6, and say Open. If you don't have a frame and you still select a picture, it's going to follow your cursor. I get a little preview icon. Wherever I click and drag, it can automatically make a frame for the picture that I have. I can still change the size of my frame, or I can click on the content and move my frame around. But that places it inside of here. I'll give you one more quick tip. I'm going to delete these away. I've got 8 different thumbnails that I'm working with. Let me show you how to quickly create 8 different frames. I'm going to click and drag. I'm still holding down my mouse and I'm using my arrow keys. Left and right will divide up my area into multiple different frames, or up and down will also give me a row and column. So very quickly I can create multiple sets of frames. In this case I'll just do a series of them. So there's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 different frames in one click. I was able to quickly move them. With them selected, I can actually quickly place my images into there. We can go to File and Place. I can select all 8 of them. When I say Open, notice now it's still following my cursor. And if you look really closely, you can see an 8, meaning I've got 8 images loaded into my cursor. I can click inside of the area and it places them automatically into those frames as well. Pretty cool? Okay, I think it's cool at least. Once it's in there, it's then a matter of placing it exactly where I want it to go onto my frame. But make sure you select the frame and not the content itself. Haha, there we go. Come down here. Alright, that's the basic kind of overview when working with InDesign, is knowing what frame and what content you want to place into it. The first thing it's going to have you do, and I'll step you through this one, is to create a simple little film strip at the bottom of your page. To do this, it's going to use some of the basic drawing tools. Here's a little film strip that it creates. As with Illustrator, you're kind of working with vectors. So some of the drawing tools that they have are working with rectangles. You've got your direct selection tool and your pen tool. Makes it very, very easy to create this. Let me show you how quickly you can go with it. If I was to make a rectangle, we'll just click and drag it off. We'll swap it up so it's a black rectangle. It'll ask you to place it a specific place, so pay attention to your X and Y coordinates, height and width, and also your reference point as well. I'll even zoom in farther. And we'll make a rounded rectangle for each of the little extra bits from here. In this case, we'll fill it in with white or paper. Get rid of none. To do a rounded rectangle, zoom in even further. I've got my objects selected. One thing I can add to a frame is a rounded edge. You can find that in one of the tool options at the very top up here. By default, it's got a squared off edge. You can do fancy edges, beveled, even rounded edges. There's that. You can see a little preview come up from here. The amount that it's rounded is determined by that number. See what a fancy edge looks like. Ooh, too large. Beveled, inset, way too much for that. Let's keep it rounded. There we go. If I wanted to make a copy of it, so what's my keyboard shortcut to copy and paste? Y'all remember? Command C, Command V. So that's one thing. What was the keyboard shortcut if I wanted to use my selection tool to click and drag and make a copy? What do I hold down? Option, bingo. Same is true in InDesign. You can hold down Option and quickly and easily make a copy of it from here. Hey, since I have my what am I trying to say? Smart Guides turned on. Watch what happens when I make another copy of it. Click and drag. It automatically tells me the same distance between the first one and the second one. So it kind of takes the guesswork out of evenly spacing these out. So having the Smart Guides makes that really, really easy as well. Another thing I can do, if you go up to Object, you can do a transform again. In other words, make a copy of it again. I do transform again, it'll make another copy over and over again as well. Transform the sequence and makes several copies of it over again as well. What I like to use is what's called step and repeat. If I was to repeat this and go all the way down here, I know I'm going to need like 20 or 30 different copies of it. So I'm going to select this one. Under Edit, stepping and repeating, it's going to, in other words, take what I have and repeat the copy a certain number of steps or a certain number of times. If I turn on Preview, check out what I can do with it. The count right now is set to 0. The offset, the amount that I'm moving it over horizontally about 1/4 of an inch. As I increase the number that I do, I can tell it exactly how many copies that I need. And I say, okay, got my copies done, and very quickly I've spread that out. Pretty cool? That's how these little extra bits are created along your film strip. The other thing to do, let's actually make the rest of the copies from here. We'll select multiple. We'll pretend that fills out the rest of the page. I need to cut away from it. So I'm going to select just the white areas. Hold down Option, make a copy of that. And then I want to turn those white areas into an area that I can punch out. So we'll need to make that into a compound path. Don't worry, the book is going to go over exactly what I'm talking about. So from paths, we'll make it a compound, which means it's all one solid path. And then I can take these two and I can subtract away the white pixels from the black vector area under Pathfinder. Subtract. Looks the same, however, check it out when I pull it off to the edge. You can see it's not just white, it's actually the paper that's behind it. It's actually transparent. As within Photoshop, InDesign can also do some basic layer effects or special effects. All of your special effects are found under the FX menu at the top, so things like drop shadows, inner shadows, beveling, you can choose those. Even drop shadows used so often, it's got its own little thing. You can select that one and move and place it within here. Okay. That's the basic overview of using InDesign. Later on, I'll get into the more specific kind of things that you'll create. Turn your computer back over to y'all. The rest of this time is for you to get started on it.